had to say about this offer, as she absolutely slammed it. This is what Breanna Stewart had to say, man. Time is of the essence. Stewart added that she doesn't know if there's a drop dead date, at which point the league will no longer be able to start the season on time if there's no CBA in place. However, she made it clear that everyone knows they're running out of time and need to get a deal done soon. I think that both sides are very aware that this has gone on way longer than it needed to, Stewart said. But hopefully we can really start hearing each other.
That right there is the sound of a negotiation hitting a wall. Breanna Stewart, WNBA Players Association Vice President, just made it very clear that the league's latest proposal isn't fixing what matters most: revenue sharing. The owners offered better housing, upgraded facilities, and raised the salary cap to $5.65 million for 2026. Stewart's response? Thanks, but no thanks. We want our share of the money the league makes, and everything else is just decoration. This isn't just talk. This is a basic disagreement about how professional basketball should work in 2025. And with training camps supposed to start in less than 3 months, both sides are running out of time.
Man, oh man, it appears these WNBA players, they are nuts. They are absolutely insane, and they are continuing to try to play hardball with these WNBA owners in regards to the latest CBA offer made by the owners. Breanna Stewart absolutely slapped around that last offer. Denied. We have to get into it. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification, and hype the video for me as well. It will be greatly appreciated. Now, we continue to follow what's going on.
The timeline here matters. NBA owners sent their latest proposal on Friday, more than 6 weeks after getting the players' last offer. 6 weeks. That's not how productive negotiations work. That's what happens when two sides are preparing for war. The players held an emergency executive committee call on Sunday to discuss the proposal. According to Stewart, the first thing they did wasn't even look at the offer itself. It was getting everyone on the same page about what they're asking for. That tells you something important. There are cracks in their unity. The WNBA Players Association has been falling apart since December. We've seen Australian players like Jade Melbourne publicly say they can't afford a lockout. Rookie Baylor Shireman admitted on camera she's scared about losing her paycheck. These aren't veterans with overseas contracts and endorsement deals. These are middle-tier players who need their WNBA salaries to survive. And they're watching Breanna Stewart, Nneka Ogwumike, and Napisa Collier, who all have deals with Athletes Unlimited or Unrivaled, control a negotiating strategy that could cost them everything.
It being a large contingent of WNBA players is a key point. There's a large contingent of WNBA players playing in Athletes Unlimited, not Unrivaled, not Project B. They're not making a bunch of money right now playing basketball in Athletes Unlimited. This is just to get some conditioning, get some 5-on-5 in, and things of that nature. This is not something where you are going to fatten your pockets. So ultimately, the players in this league, these are those middle of the pack players who seem to be getting left out in thought by the veterans. The Nneka Ogwumikes, the Breanna Stewarts, the Napisa Colliers, who are all compromised but also can afford a lockout. These players, majority of these players in Athletes Unlimited, cannot afford a WNBA.
Here's what makes that Athletes Unlimited meeting so important. Nneka Ogwumike, the WNBA Players Association president, flew to Nashville specifically to check in with players competing in that league. Not Unrivaled, where the top players are making 6 figures for an 8-week season. Athletes Unlimited, where players are competing for small paychecks and practice time. These are the forgotten players in this negotiation. The ones who don't have unrivaled contracts, the ones who aren't making 7 figures overseas, the ones who really need the WNBA season to start on time because it's their main income. And what Ogwumike heard in that meeting, according to sources, is exactly what you'd expect. Fear, frustration, and a growing feeling that the players leading these negotiations don't fully understand what a lockout would mean for regular union members. Because when you're Breanna Stewart with an unrivaled contract, endorsement deals with Puma and other major brands, and the ability to make top money overseas, missing a WNBA season is annoying. When you're a second-year player fighting for a roster spot, it could end your career.
Jade Melbourne and a bunch of Australian players who said they could not afford a WNBA lockout, and that's not what they wanted. I been knew y'all wasn't on the same page. Here it says, The WNBA's proposal, the league's first response to the players' latest offer, which came more than 6 weeks ago, didn't move much money-wise, Stewart said, but there were some minimum standard requirements that did come into play. That was important, Stewart added, because that means that the league heard us on things that matter to us. And it also means that the league and the owners have been willing to compromise. We are still waiting to hear what you players have compromised on. We haven't heard it yet. Notably, the league's latest proposal offered concessions on player housing and facility standards. First-year players and players on minimum salary will be provided a one-bedroom apartment for the first 3 years of the CBA, while developmental players...
Now, let's talk about what the owners actually offered, because this is where it gets interesting. The proposal includes one-bedroom apartments for first-year players and those making minimum salary for the first 3 years of the CBA. Developmental players get studio apartments. That's a significant concession because the league has been pushing back hard on continuing to provide housing at all. The salary cap rises to $565 million in 2026. Maximum salaries climbed to approximately $1.3 million in year one of the deal, eventually reaching nearly $2 million by the end of the contract. That's SAC-7. Multiple players per team become eligible for max contracts. The minimum salary starts at $230,000. The average salary starts at $530,000. Those are real numbers, substantial increases over the current CBA. For context, the current maximum salary is around $240,000. We're talking about a more than five-fold increase in max contracts. The current minimum is roughly $60,000. That's jumping to $230,000. These aren't token gestures. These are transformative raises for the majority of players in the league. But here's the problem, and Stewart states it explicitly in that clip. None of that addresses the revenue-sharing gap. The players want 30% of league revenue. The owners are holding firm at around 15%, though they're willing to increase total compensation through higher salaries and benefits.
However, the league's response did not address the gap between the sides on revenue sharing, though it did raise the salary cap to $5.65 million in 2026. A source familiar with the negotiation told CBS Sports. How that rise would affect specific salaries is unclear. The WNBA's proposal in early December offered a $5 million salary cap and a max salary of about $1.3 million in the first year of the deal. A source close to the situation told CBS Sports that over the course of the proposed deal, the maximum salary will raise to almost $2 million, and that multiple players on each team will be eligible for the max salary. The minimum salary in this deal will start at $230,000. The average will start at $530,000. Now,
This is the main disagreement causing this whole standoff. The owners are saying, we'll pay you more money. A lot more money, but we're not tying it to a percentage of revenue because this league still doesn't consistently make a profit. The players are saying, we don't care about your accounting. We want the same deal NBA players have, which is roughly 50% of basketball income. The problem with the players' position is that the WNBA's money situation isn't like the NBA's. The league has lost money for most of its existence. The 2024 season, driven almost entirely by Caitlin Clark's impact on ratings and attendance, was reportedly the first time the league came close to breaking even. Multiple teams still lose money every year. The business model depends on NBA money and owners willing to lose money while they build the brand. The owners aren't being unfair when they say we can't promise to give you 30% of revenue when we're not sure there will even be positive revenue to share. What they're offering instead is guaranteed salary increases that put real money in players' pockets whether the league makes a profit or not. But Stewart and the WNBA Players Association leadership aren't interested in that setup. They see it as the owners controlling the story and the numbers. If you tie pay to revenue sharing, the thinking goes it forces ownership to actually focus on growing the business because their labor costs automatically go up with success.
Hear us on things that are non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiables? For them, it has been revenue sharing. They want 30% of revenue share. The WNBA is refusing to move on that. This is what you have to pay attention to in this entire thing right here, right there. Revenue sharing. The owners have compromised on many things. We haven't seen anything the players have compromised on. The one thing the owners have stayed steady on is revenue sharing. We cannot go up to 30%. We absolutely will not. In fact, we can't go above this 15, but we are giving everyone more money. We are going to continue to pay for you guys' housing, which we didn't want to do. We're going to give on a lot of things. Breanna Stewart absolutely slammed that offer and basically said, look, all of that, the housing, all of the little things, yeah, that's cool. I don't care about keychains and trinkets. We care about revenue share. And therefore, this deal is denied.
This has gone on way longer than it needed to. That's a direct quote from Breanna Stewart about these negotiations. And she's right about the timeline. The current agreement expires in October. Free agency is supposed to open in January 2026. Training camps usually start in late April. We're now in February 2025, and the two sides still completely disagree on the basic money structure. Stewart says she doesn't know if there's a deadline where starting the season on time becomes impossible. But everyone involved in professional sports knows how this works. If there's no deal by late March, teams can't plan their training camps. If there's no deal by early April, free agency gets delayed. If there's no deal by mid-April, you're looking at either starting late or canceling games. And here's what Stewart reveals in that final statement. Hopefully we can really start hearing each other and they hear us on things that are non-negotiables. Translation: the players have drawn a hard line on revenue sharing, and they're not moving. Everything else, the housing, the facilities, the minimum standards, that's all nice to have, but the non-negotiable is getting that revenue percentage. The owners have now compromised on multiple things. They agreed to keep paying for housing even though they resisted at first. They've increased the salary cap a lot. They've raised minimum salaries nearly 4 times higher. They've made multiple players per team eligible for max contracts. They've improved facilities and working conditions. What have the players compromised on? That's the question Stewart can't answer, because the answer seems to be nothing. They started at 30% revenue sharing. They're still at 30% revenue sharing. They've accepted some of the extra benefits the owners offered. But on the core money issue, there's been zero movement from the players' side.
And everybody was on the same page, but we found out that that was a lie, and there is a fracture, which I already knew about because I put out videos in December and November with Deja Kelly saying she didn't want to lock out with.
This is where the conflict of interest becomes impossible to ignore. Breanna Stewart has a big contract with Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league co-founded by her and Nafisa Collier. Nneka Ogwumike, the WNBA Players Association president, also plays in Unrivaled. Nafisa Collier, another executive committee member, literally owns part of Unrivaled. These are the 3 players driving the hard negotiating strategy that could cause a WNBA lockout. And what happens if the WNBA season gets delayed or canceled? Unrivaled becomes the main domestic option for women's professional basketball. Athletes Unlimited gains power. The alternative leagues that these executives own suddenly become much more important. Now, I'm not saying Stewart, Ogwumike, and Collier are deliberately sabotaging WNBA negotiations to help their own businesses, but I am saying it looks really bad. And I am saying that players like Baylor Shireman, who don't have unrivaled contracts or ownership stakes, are watching this and wondering if their union leaders really represent their interests or are pursuing an agenda that helps a small group of elite players. The owners have made this point repeatedly in private conversations with media. They're negotiating with union leaders who have direct financial reasons to see the WNBA weaken compared to competitor leagues. That doesn't mean the players' demands are wrong, but it does mean there's a real question about whether the union's position reflects what's best for all 400-plus players in the league, or what's best for the 30 players who have alternative income. Stewart's rejection of this latest offer makes that tension clear. The owners came back with real money, real increases, real improvements to working conditions, and the response from union leadership was basically not good enough because they didn't give the one thing they really want: a percentage of revenue they can use regardless of whether the league actually makes a profit. Here's the reality check that needs to happen. The WNBA is not the NBA. It doesn't make billions in revenue. It doesn't have a 50-year track record of making profit. It doesn't get the same media money or sponsorship dollars. Demanding the same revenue-sharing structure as the NBA, when the economics are completely different, isn't a real negotiating position. It's fantasy. What the owners are offering is substantial, guaranteed money that doesn't depend on creative accounting or revenue guesses. A $230,000 minimum salary is life-changing for players currently making $60,000. A $1.3 million maximum salary climbing to $2 million puts WNBA stars in the same money conversation as professional athletes in other women's sports. But Stewart and the union leadership have decided that's not enough. They want the revenue percentage and they're willing to risk a lockout to get it. That means they're willing to risk the financial security of hundreds of players who can't afford to miss paychecks. all to fight for a principle that may not even work economically for the league. The next few weeks will show whether this is a negotiating trick or a real dead end. If the players truly won't accept a deal without 30% revenue sharing, and the owners truly won't offer more than 15%, then we're headed for a work stoppage. Training camps will be delayed, the season opener will be pushed back, and players like Baylor Shireman, who are already publicly scared about a lockout, will pay the price for a strategy driven by players who have other ways to make money. Stewart's right about one thing: this has gone on way longer than it needed to. But the reason it's dragged out isn't because the owners are being unreasonable. It's because the union leaders have drawn a hard line on an issue where the economics don't support their position, and they're refusing to compromise. The owners have moved on housing, salaries, facilities, and working conditions. The players have moved on nothing. So here's the question that should be dominating the conversation right now. What are the players willing to give up to get that revenue sharing percentage? Because negotiation means both sides have to compromise. And so far, we've only seen one side doing that. If Breanna Stewart and the union leadership truly believe 30% revenue sharing is non-negotiable, they need to explain to players like Baylor Shireman why missing paychecks and potentially losing a season is worth fighting for that principle. They need to explain why guaranteed salary increases totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars per player aren't enough. They need to explain why the money structure being offered, which would make WNBA players among the highest paid women's team sport athletes in the world, isn't good enough. Because right now, from the outside looking in, it seems the players driving these negotiations have other income sources that protect them from the consequences of a lockout, and they're pursuing an extreme strategy that puts most union members' financial security at risk. That's not leadership. That's self-interest pretending to be solidarity. The clock is ticking. The season is supposed to start in less than 3 months, and the gap between these two sides isn't getting smaller, it's getting bigger. Because one side keeps compromising and the other side keeps saying it's not enough. Eventually, something has to give. The question is whether it'll be the owner's resolve, the players' demands, or the 2025 WNBA season itself. What do you think? Are the players right to hold firm on revenue sharing, or are they overplaying their hand and risking a lockout that will hurt the very players they're supposed to represent? Drop your opinion in the comments, because this situation is about to reach a breaking point, and everyone involved needs to hear what fans actually think about this mess.